It was a fun weekend this past weekend as we finally got back to high school recruiting. It's been a long spring of transfer portal and roster construction for this upcoming season, but I tell you what, the grassroots basketball has still been going. And finally, this weekend, they had the college coaches' attention to help me break down everything we've seen, culminating with this weekend. I'm going to welcome in Eric Bossi and Travis Branham to help break this all down. Now, fellas, we have 4 different sneaker circuits this spring, and we have covered them all, not just this past weekend when college coaches were out, but in the weeks leading up to this past weekend, really ever since the Final Four. I know, Bossi, you were out that very next weekend. So we want to start and break down everything we've seen over the course of the last 4 to 6 weeks, again, culminating with the recent recruiting period. Let's start with the Nike EYBL. Trav, you were in Memphis this week, and the big news was that Tyran Stokes, the #1 ranked prospect in the rising senior class, returned to grassroots basketball. What'd you see from him?
Yeah, obviously the talent was just off the charts. His body looks great. He's in great shape right now. However, in the game I watched, he left a lot to be desired, to be honest with you. His approach is something that we've talked about over the last couple of years. And throughout the course of the game, there's times where he really got frustrated out on the court, and it was very evident. However, the shot making, the talent level, his ability to defend, rebound, score the basketball, were all displayed. And he's still, despite having sat out the first session, by all accounts, it looks like he has retained that #1 spot in this 2026 class.
Now, Trav, you wrote about this, and I think it's a fair point. That #1 spot very much up for grabs here in the coming weeks and months as we go through the recruiting periods. And June is as busy as July is now, and so that's going to be a big talking point for us and something we're going to be watching closely as that battle continues to evolve. Bossi, I want to go to you because I know you had seen EYBL in Phoenix a few weeks earlier. Is there one player that you think, I know there are a lot of players, but is there anyone in particular that you feel like is really making a jump from the EYBL and pushing top 10 status?
So I think the guy that stands out for me, and I know Travis really liked him in Memphis over the weekend, is Dylan Mingo, the PSA Cardinals. And we're talking about a 6'5" wiry guard who sits just on the outside of our 5-star rankings right now. But he's a guy that I think is definitely going to push himself into there when we update those here in the month of June. He gets wherever he wants with the ball. And what's interesting is with his high school team at Lehigh, he plays more of a backup supporting type role, so you don't really get to see him be a dominant scorer. But in the EYBL, he's a score first guy who seems to hit every hole, every gap, and get to the rim. He's improving his outside shooting. He's really dynamic as a defender. And what I really like about him is that he's one of the youngest guys in the class. He's still only 16 years old. He won't turn 17 until a few months into the summer. And just a guy that continues to trend up in the right direction.
And, I'm glad you brought up about how he acclimated to that new role, because that's something that I think we've seen some guys struggle with who are maybe complementary pieces as underclassmen, even this year as a junior, and then they come in and become a focal point. And did they know how to be the alpha? And I think to your point, Mingo is showing that he certainly does. Trav, I know you loved him as well. Trav, I want to ask you about when we get into still sticking to the EYBL, we're going to go one circuit at a time. But have there been any names, and there always are in the spring, who have really emerged and proven that they're maybe in a different category than we had previously expected?
I mean, the one that immediately jumps off the charts based on this past weekend was J.J. Andrews. He committed to Arkansas heading into the EYBL this weekend. And what he showed playing with Brad Beal Elite, I mean, he dominated this past weekend. And in the game I watched, he's taken on their biggest rival and arguably the biggest rivalry in the entire EYBL against Mocan, who has a very good team, very well constructed. But JJ was by far the best player out on the court. His strength and versatility on both ends of the court. He plays with a really high motor. He's an explosive athlete, and he's really evolved in the half court. He was making shots from three, creating off the dribble, finishing at the rim. And to me, it looked like he grew another inch over the last couple of months. So from everything from physically to the skill set that he's now displaying, he really jumped off and looks like we have him way too low at this very moment.
Well, stay tuned. That may change. Trav, want to ask you about one more guy, just reading your recaps from Memphis. Kohl Rosario is a name that has gotten some definite momentum and just seems like he is gaining traction on the recruiting trail. What can you tell us about him and what you saw?
Yeah, he was another standout, one of the hot topics on the sidelines amongst college coaches, playing with Team CP3 right now. He's a 6'5" wing with long arms and a college-ready body. And college-ready is something to note here, as he is a player that there's talks he could reclassify to the 2025 class. And by all accounts, I think there's going to be some coaches interested in potentially trying to field that situation out. He's a great shooter from three, but has more to his game than just shot making on the perimeter. He showed feel and ability on the defensive end of the court. He had a big time tip dunk in front of a bunch of head coaches. So he's a sneaky athlete and a guy who can also create and pass off the dribble. So I think right now where we have him ranked is too low. He looks like he could be a top 50 recruit in this class. So he's generated a lot of buzz and one to keep an eye on as that 2025 option is at his disposal.
It's going to be very interesting because now that the portal is closed, college coaches have an idea of who they can target in terms of the transfer market. We've seen them attack the international and European markets in particular, but we know from years past the reclass market is going to be not necessarily produce a high volume of players, but a couple of strategic additions here in the final months of the recruiting season. All right, guys, in addition to the Nike EYBL, you have both attended some Pro 16 events sponsored by Puma. Basi, I will start with you. This is a circuit that has a top prospect, and this has been a spring of revitalization of sorts for Quincy Wadley. Tell us about his story and what you've seen.
Yeah, so Quincy Wadley is a kid who's from the DMV area that transferred out to Compass Prep in Phoenix this year, who missed pretty much the entire season due to injury. So when you're talking about a guy that we really haven't seen since the end of his sophomore year, you're wanting to see where he is. And man, I really liked what I saw. One of the things that was always stood out for him is he's a big shot making guard. That still rings true. He's really gone to work on his body. He's added some strength so that he can power through some guys on his way to the rim. And he's just really able to create off the dribble even more than ever. So when you see a guy that you've got ranked in the top 45, top 50 that you haven't seen for a while, you're really interested to see what he's going to do. And he looks to be as good as advertised, if not somebody that could maybe be moving up a little bit throughout the course of the summer.
Yeah, that's exciting stuff because he, had been a guy who missed a lot of time, was hard to find even before that. Now playing for the same Team Museum squad that made some waves last year with Eric Ryba and others on that Pro 16 circuit sponsored by Puma. Trav, I want to ask you about a guy who is in our rankings, but we're seeing some very positive growth from. That is Gavin Placide, one half of the Twins over there. Tell me specifically about Gavin, though, in your evaluations this spring and in your intel, what you're seeing and hearing.
Yeah, physically he's everything you look for in a high major power forward, staying 6'8" and over. I haven't seen him personally not over a year, but roughly a year. And it's very clear he has gone to work on his body and in the weight room. He's put on 15, 20 pounds of muscle. He's a strong 6'8" power forward. That's a really good athlete. And right now, the thing that I'm monitoring the most with him is going to be his motor moving forward. I watched him twice at Pro 16 a couple of weeks ago out in Los Angeles. In the first game, he was dominant, took the game over, was able to get to the rim, use his size and strength to just impose on defenders and finish above the rim, flashed an improving shot from three, and also flashed some ability to see the floor and make some passes off a live dribble. However, the second game I watched, he was much quieter, and we have discussed that amongst our team over the past year in regards to the Placide twins in terms of just being more consistent with their motor and their aggression out on the court. So I got to see both sides of it, but the talent is undeniable. This is a kid on the rise.
Basi, I know you're a believer. Before we move on, I want to give you a chance to interject there on Placide if you'd like.
Yeah, a lot of the things that Travis talks about ring true. When I saw him in Memphis here 2 weeks ago, what struck me is he was much more consistent than we had seen. I'd talked to Travis. I've been kind of one of the guys who's been most frustrated by his inconsistency, and also just a thing that maybe this is just kind of the way he carries himself. You never know like how badly this kid wants it, but he's starting to show a little more emotion. He's starting to show some of the little things like communicating with his teammates and playing a little bit harder. And I think that he's a guy that, from a tools standpoint, has top 50, maybe even top 25 type tools in the class. So it's really nice to see him putting all that together. And then, his twin brother Gallagher, who's just outside the rankings right now, is coming along too, is just a slightly smaller version of his brother.
All right, now this past weekend in Ohio, our own Brandon Jenkins was at session 2 of the Under Armour Association. Bossy, you attended session 1, which I believe was just a week after the Final Four, so no break for you. I want to ask you about some of the top players on that circuit. Has there been one guy in particular who has really stood out to you in that circuit so far this spring?
The guy who stood out to me was a guy who's going to be one of the biggest breakout guys in the country when we redo our rankings here in June. That's Gage Mayfield. He's a 6'7" small forward from Alabama. He actually goes to the same high school that produced New Orleans Pelicans forward Herbert Jones. He's athletic. He's got every tool, and he can shoot the ball and feel. It's just a matter of getting acclimated to playing this high level basketball. But things are happening quick for him. Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee, Virginia Tech, all these high majors are starting to offer him. And he's a guy who it's safe to say he's going to enter the rankings when we update them in June. It's just going to be a matter of how high. And certainly that top 50 to top 75 status isn't out of the question when it comes to him.
And Bossy, Joe Philon is already a top 50 guy, one of the very best prospects in that Under Armour association. What have you seen from him so far this spring?
Philon's a really interesting guy. What stands out to most to me is he's got to be one of the most versatile defenders in the class. He really reminds me a lot of 2025's Caleb Wilson in that regard. That yes, he's on the lean side, but he can switch anywhere on the floor. If you need him to handle a point guard on a ball screen for a minute, he can do that. He can recover and protect the rim. He's just really, really fluid and an athlete. Then on the offensive end, you can kind of really create a lot of matchups with him. He might maybe be best suited as a face-up four who can create matchup problems, but he's also capable of legitimately playing as a big wing. He's got to get stronger. He's got to get a little bit more confident with the jump shooting, but he's a guy that, I could really see taking off. USF had been in there under the old staff. I'm sure the new staff is going to be on him well, but I won't be surprised if Florida State and some of the other regional high majors really start to make him a priority because he's got a lot of ability.
All right, now let's talk about Adidas 3SS. Travis, you saw them in California just a week or two ago. Bossy and I were there in Iowa this past weekend. Want to ask you first and foremost, there is an underclassman making a big charge. So, Trav, I will start with you. Tell us about Bruce Branch and just how high you think he might be able to get.
Yeah, we currently have him sitting at the number 10 overall spot in that 2027 class. And he is a player that we've been watching since he was a freshman from an early stage, 6'5", long athletic wing that can make some shots and score and create some off the dribble. However, over the last 5-6 months, we saw him as recently as January playing with his Perry High School team out at Hoop Hall West. And even since then, he has made a very clear jump. His body looks great. He's added on muscle. He's much more fluid and explosive as an athlete, and his game is just very well rounded. A guy that can score from all three levels. He was making tough pull-up jumpers from mid-range and from three. He's got vision. He can pass. He can create off the dribble, and is also a really good defender. So when you're looking for an impact freshman, when it comes to that frame and the skill set and what they can bring to the floor right away, I don't know if there's anybody better than him right now. Now, obviously, we have a guy, Baba Olodotun, who's a tremendous long-term prospect, and I saw him over the weekend, and a guy we will be talking about over the weeks to come. But Bruce Branch has absolutely made a charge and is in the conversation for that number 1 spot, in my opinion.
All right, the race is on for number 1 in multiple classes now. Bossy, I thought arguably the best player in Iowa this weekend was Taylen Kinney. My admiration for his game is well documented at this point, but he scored 20 plus in all 4 games for Wildcat Select. He had his full bag going, scoring at all 3 levels. But tell me what you saw from this dynamic lead guard.
I saw most of the same stuff that you saw, Adam. And what I really thought as I was watching him is I thought I was watching a young version of Cole Anthony back when he was in the high school days. A guy who's wired to probably score and get to the rim first, but makes enough jump shots to keep defenders honest, and just a guy who seems ideally suited to come in at the college level and be able to score and be able to make things happen off the dribble. He's got an exceedingly long list at 15 schools, but buzz around the gym was at maybe Kentucky, Louisville and Texas might be three to watch early on with him, but he's a guy. He came in ranked as a top 15 player, looked like potentially the best point guard, and certainly backed all that up in Council Bluffs.
Yeah, I think he lived up to that ranking as well, which is not easy to do when you have the X on your back. The other thing I would add about Kinney is I think he's a pretty good defender too. You know, like most high school kids, he's not committed to it on a full-time basis, but I've seen him pick up guys full court. I've seen him blow up ball screens and show a lot of potential on that end of the floor because he's got good length and strength.